Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Devin Copfer. I am the director and co-founder and violinist of Chamber Brews. I will be performing Suites by Kate alongside our team of musicians. This is Sam Johnson playing the cello, Emily Way playing the viola, and Elizabeth Mandich-Nowak playing the violin, along with Ed Bak as the pianist for this piece. We have with us Griffin Candey, the composer, who is currently pursuing his DMA in musical composition from the University of Michigan. Hi, Griffin. Thanks for being here.
Hey Devin, thanks for having me.
It's just it's fun to meet you after having been preparing your music, and we're just rolling right down,
Cooking. Yep.
tracks here. And I don't know how to describe it other than delightful. I love shows, just in general. I love opera productions. I love musical theater productions. I love being a part of a pit. I love being on stage. It's just, there's a magic about a show.
Sweets is, I mean, as much as it is sort of like a somewhat dark comedy drama thing, sort of melange of things, that it's really fun. And it's not an opera that like you need to have a lot of opera foreknowledge for. If you've never like seen Rigoletto, that's also fine. You know what I mean? I'm not referencing not referencing those things. It is built for you. It is built for now audiences. You know what I mean? I'm not. This is not like a 17th century, 18th century callback. If you are someone who enjoys theater in general, then I think it will. There's hopefully something you can sink your teeth into in it.
Going into this idea, you have written for a lot of different ensembles. You've written for different vocal ensembles, and I want to know why opera. What draws you to opera?
A lot of it is kind of just like my background. Both my bachelor's and my master's are in voice, so it was sort of like my entry point. And I performed in a fair amount of operas. Both I went to Michigan State for undergrad, and then the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign for my master's down in the cornfields. And so it's not so much as like of me discovering opera as of like you can take the boy out of opera, but you can't take the opera out of the boy. Like it's just sort of it's just sort of built in, and that even when I'm not writing opera, there's things where people recognize that things are still sort of opera adjacent. I just wrote a straight up and down basically sax sonata, and for Tim McAllister, who's the sax teacher here, um, and he was saying, yeah, the opening of this piece feels very much it's kind of recitative-y, and I was like, dang it, I wasn't trying to do opera in this one, you know what I mean? I was trying to not opera, and I still kind of did, like I did. So it's really, yeah, it's sort of baked in, and even as someone who doesn't really sing anymore, it's still, I don't know, it's still a really sort of core part of my musical identity, and sort of how I sort of connect with the field.
I can imagine as a non-composer, so as someone who does not know what I'm talking about, I can imagine that that would be true, that you would experience the effects of your chosen instrument in all of your writing. And
Mhm.
I don't think it's a bad thing that you could hear vocal music in the
Mhm.
saxophone piece. I think that is what part of what makes you you, and I think that's a really powerful thing. You have this background from Michigan State, from Illinois, from and now you're studying at University of Michigan. I can see a lot of your works, a lot of your teaching residencies have kind of sprung out of the Midwest. But
Mhm.
I've also seen your works being performed all over the country. And would you attribute that to the glory and reach of the Midwest? Or would you attribute that to, your kind of hustle and drive and your commitment to making things happen?
I mean, it doesn't take a lot for me to extol the Midwest because I'm a very Midwest boy. I'm from Michigan originally. I'm from Southwest Michigan, and I always joke that I envisioned myself like, like eventually, like, especially as a singer, like heading off to that, out east and doing East Coast things. And then I ironically moved from Southwest Michigan to Lansing to Illinois. And then from there could have been the jumping off point to out east or out west. And then I moved to the Upper Peninsula for 7 years. So really just sort of very, very much like keeping it in the family, Midwest wise. But I think people kind of underestimate the Midwest as a place where cool art happens, because there is a lot of cool art happening, and not just in sort of like, not just in your Chicago's and Detroits, where there is also a lot of great things happening, but in Columbus and in Ann Arbor and in Champaign-Urbana and in Madison and in Duluth, Minnesota, and like there's a lot of really, really cool things happening. So I think part of that is that it's not like I have to like force art to happen here. There's a ton going on, and a lot of sort of like spaces and people and enthusiasm and audiences and everything. In terms of like doing stuff elsewhere, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, certainly I try to sort of make sure that I'm not staying as insular as possible and really only operating in like states that touch a Great Lake. Although I do enjoy those five big boys. I think there's also like there's kind of a reciprocity there where my experience is very sort of Midwestern and very sort of Michigan-y, and I think having opportunities to work with folks elsewhere and be in other spaces and be in other like especially like green spaces and sort of just basically experiencing more parts of the country, it just brings more threads of creativity into the mix. You know what I mean? Rather than just sort of like, this is the one thing that I know. I live in the forest and that's what I do. You know what I mean? There's getting more sort of like fuel for the fire is always helpful. So yeah, I think it's kind of give and take.
I love that. I have one more question about your process and really kind of getting to where you are right now, which is a pretty powerful place, I think, in terms of having your works being performed regularly, about as a composer, having your new works being commissioned consistently, having premieres occurring all over the country. So what is some advice that you would give to a composer that's perhaps finishing their undergrad, their Bachelor of Music, perhaps is finishing their Master's of Music, and what are some of the things that they might look toward in kind of creating this network of connection, really, which is what facilitates those kinds of things to occur?
Mm-hmm. That is a thing that I tend to talk to folks about, is that people are really the currency of what we do, and not in sort of like we use people up, like sponges, but like that's how things happen. Like relationships fuel everything that we do. And so really for me, one thing that I always want folks to carry out into the world once they're done with their degrees, once they're sort of ready to head out, is that regardless of like what kind of music you write and regardless of what you're doing or what you're pursuing, that taking the time and the care to be like a really open and like helpful collaborator is deeply invaluable. I have gotten work because people enjoy the music that I write, but I have gotten, I would say, a similar, if not more amount of work because I've been not terrible to work with. There's certainly a chunk of like art history of like people who were awful to be around, but people were like, but they're a genius. You know what I mean? But we have to work with them because they're a genius. And I think luckily maybe I'm just like a doe-eyed youngster in this regard, but like I think that time is passing to some degree. Like I think there's more and more sort of like wherewithal of like, it doesn't really matter if you are like the pinnacle person. Like if you're not cool to be around, if you are like very not great to work with, then I don't think people are going to want to work with you. There's certainly an other side to that coin. That doesn't mean just like be like completely like fainting and everyone's like, oh, whatever you need. Like, you know what I mean? There's there's certainly like, you need to hold space for your own artistry and not just like, let whatever happen. But recognizing the importance of relationships and the importance of community, really. I know that sounds like an after school special, but it's not just about like I know people because then that helps me get work. It's like I know people also because then they, help me through things and I help them through things. And it's a tough business. So if you're just out there doing it by yourself, that's a deeply lonely and also not very like, I don't know, not very satisfying way to go about it.
It makes all the sense in the world, and it deeply, deeply aligns with some of the things that I know to be true, which is that when you show up for other people show up for you. I just think that that's such a powerful way to look at it, and I think is evidenced by the body of work that you have and by your reach in your work. I'd like to turn to Suites by Kate. I cannot wait to pick your brain about this piece.
Yeah.
I'd love to read the description. A darkly comedic opera in 2 parts. Suites by Kate. When Elizabeth Brigman's father dies suddenly, she decides to return to the small town that shunned her 12 years earlier. In the outwardly cheery glow of 1950s rural America, Elizabeth and her partner, Kate, must square with the lurking disapproval of the town, the teetering success of the family business, and her family's, quite literal, deals with the devil. Some of the themes that occur in this piece are, resiliency, courage, and yet acceptance, which is this not feeling the need to change for anything or anyone. One of the things that I think is very interesting is an inherent distrust with the setting of the show in this town.
Mm.
And there's something about the uneasiness of the writing in some points, the uneasiness of the setting that creates this almost tenuous ground for us to stand on. Is that intentional? Is what I'm speaking about something that was very much a center point for that part of the writing?
Yeah, to a large degree. So, I mean, in any sort of like found family centered show, it's not an inherently antagonistic or evil place, but it is a place that holds warring memories, that there are positive memories and negative memories. And that makes it a difficult place to be in because you want to celebrate it because the good memories also exist in that space, but the negative ones do too. So it is that kind of tenuousness of sort of like, I can't just fully sign on to this place. I can't just like give it a gold star. There's still so much sort of wrapped up here, especially because a lot of times we can't, the things that formed the negative memories might not exist anymore. You know what I mean? It was a moment in time that happened, and then there's not even like a person that we can specifically talk to that like made whatever that difficulty was arise. You know what I mean? So it's this kind of like liminal space of like, there's something difficult to deal with here, and also like not a really clear path to like putting a bow on it and putting it on the shelf. So yes, that kind of tenuousness was definitely like inherent in the environment. I wanted to at least attempt to show both sides of that there is warmth and there is good memories and there is positive stuff, but not only that.